A single street lamp buzzed softly outside the dusty window of Popeye's cramped quarters above the rundown dockside tavern, casting a flickering light across the room. Outside, the sea lapped against barnacled piers, and the night sky seemed empty, almost starless. Popeye stared at his calloused hands and wondered if he had ever truly lived a day in his life. Each sunrise and sunset blended together like the ceaseless waves on which he'd spent half his years. Every night, he longed for something, anything, that would break the endless routine of waking, working, and sleeping. Though he rarely voiced his discontent to his crewmates, it was a hollow feeling that had burrowed into his heart. His arms, roped with lean muscle, bore the black ink anchor tattoos he'd earned through years of hauling crates and scrubbing decks on mundane merchant vessels. He never complained, it wasn't in his nature. Yet lately, a dull ache of tedium wore on him more than any storm. He quietly folded the sleeves of his salt-bleached shirt around his elbows, gazing out the window onto the deserted docks. Leaning forward, he shook his head with a weary sigh. "I'm losing me appetite for life," he muttered in his gravelly whisper, tugging the brim of his dockworker's cap lower over his forehead. His thick forearms rested on the windowsill, the faint moonlight making the lines of his tattoos stand out. It had been weeks since he'd truly savored even his beloved spinach. Nothing stirred his blood anymore. Lightning fractured the sky suddenly, painting the sea with threads of silver. Popeye inhaled sharply. "Now that's a storm," he said, feeling a small spark of excitement. It was the first real storm he'd seen in months, nature's fury to break the long monotony. He grabbed his battered coat and sprinted out onto the docks. The wind was wild, salt-laced, and alive with potential. Great forks of lightning twisted across the heavens, each crash of thunder rattling the boards under Popeye's boots. He stood in open awe of it all, a grin peeling back his weathered face. People scurried for cover, shutters slammed shut, and even the local tavern barkeep hissed for Popeye to come inside. But Popeye only took a hesitant step forward. Suddenly, a sizzling lance of lightning slammed onto the pier just yards away, forcing Popeye to dive sideways. His heart hammered. He rolled and sprang back to his feet, panting. Another flash came, and then a third, and he realized they were angling closer and closer toward him. All at once, he understood, the lightning was being drawn to the metal can of spinach tucked in his coat pocket. Desperate, Popeye yanked the can from his coat. He clutched it tightly as a swirling funnel of storm clouds gathered overhead. "Crud," he muttered. "I'm not much fair giving up me spinach, but this ain't good." He grimaced. Another streak of lightning shrieked overhead. In a panic, Popeye hurled the can straight into the sky. "Look alive, can," he roared. The thunderbolt collided with the metal can in midair. An explosion of molten green fragments blinded him, bursting into a swirl of emerald sparkles and pressurized steam. The shockwave knocked Popeye off his feet and sent him sliding across the drenched dock. His head smacked lightly against the wood, and everything blurred. When he blinked awake, the storm had vanished as though it had never existed. The planks under him were broken in places, but the sea was calm. Starlight glittered gently on the water again. Slowly, Popeye struggled to his feet. He coughed, spat a little salt from his mouth, and surveyed the destruction. Splintered wood, smoldering patches of foam, and then he saw it, an ancient, battered box lying half submerged in a tide pool at the water's edge, shimmering under the moonlight as if it begged to be noticed. Careful, Popeye plodded over, heart throbbing with curiosity. The box was small enough to fit in his hand, though chipped and covered in seaweed. Faded letters on the top read Oracle Deck. It felt as though the box itself pulsed with a subtle energy. He pried it open, revealing a deck of water-damaged cards etched with swirling designs and arcane symbols. Despite their tattered edges, they looked profoundly mysterious. Popeye lifted the top card, turning it over in the light. Its surface depicted an image of a powerful, swirling wind. He felt the hair on his arms stand on end, as though the card itself still crackled with static. Something inside him fluttered, excitement. A promise of magic, maybe. Without another thought, he tucked the deck under his coat, oblivious to the electricity still humming through his body. A new spark had been lit in him, beyond mere curiosity. He felt, dare he admit it? Wonder. That night, back in his creaking loft, Popeye cleaned the cards and found a worn instruction pamphlet curled beneath the deck. The pamphlet explained a strange practice called the mystic spread, 3 cards drawn, each one revealing a magical phenomenon, the user's perception of it, and its nature. Skeptical though he was, Popeye read on and discovered that each reading demanded a trial inside the daydreamscape, a realm shaped by imagination and belief. If one wanted to harness the truths within the cards, one must do battle with living personifications of the concepts revealed. He found his heart racing. He had no reason to trust old arcana scribbled in a soggy pamphlet, but if there was even a slim chance this was real. The night wore on while Popeye devoured every line. By dawn, he hadn't slept, but his eyes shone with more life than they had in years. "All right, Ol' Salt," he muttered to himself. "Let's see if these cards can show me the magic in this world." He ran a hand across his stubbly chin. "I can't be any gloomier than I've been." Exhausted but determined, he set the deck on the small table by his cot. The instructions explained that he needed a question. Something pressing. Something that demanded an answer. Popeye frowned thoughtfully, recalling how that storm had singled him out, like some cosmic invitation. Licking his lips, he posed his question aloud to the cards. "What magical phenomenon is happening right now under my nose? How can I perceive it, and what is the nature of said phenomenon?" He carefully drew 3 cards, spreading them face down. With a deep breath, he flipped the first. Card 1, "Hold on to me." He read the tiny instructions from the pamphlet that described its meaning. "Some mystical force is trying to sweep me away. It invites me to go with it. Wild, free, and joyous, with a dangerous edge." A tingling heat licked along his wrists. He blinked in surprise, momentarily dizzy. It felt as though a whirlwind had sprung up inside his mind. He flipped the second. Card 2, "Her hand gentles the war." The text explained, "A calming hand placed from above, to ease turmoil in the mind and reveal the magic around you." A warmth spread over Popeye's shoulders, like a gentle presence leaning close to whisper reassurance in his ear. The sensation was strangely soothing. Finally, he flipped the third. Card 3, "Grandmother ensures safe crossing." Motherly and protective, the force doesn't wish you harm. It simply wants to keep you safe from yourself. Popeye's vision blurred. A swirl of color seemed to peel away from the real world, enveloping him. He gripped the cards in alarm. The text had warned him of a daydreamscape, but he'd brushed that off as metaphorical. Now, his heart pounded, and the walls of his rented room fell away as though they were made of painted canvas. When he opened his eyes next, he stood on a rocky plateau that stretched infinitely into a cerulean sky. The air smelled of fresh dew, and a breeze danced with white dandelion fluff that spiraled upward. It was quiet. Almost too quiet. Then he heard a joyous laughter in the distance, like wind chimes. Before him appeared a figure. It, or she, was the personification of the card "Hold On To Me." Her form shimmered like living wind, whipping around a lean feminine silhouette. She beckoned Popeye closer, smiling, but her expression carried a hint of mischief that crackled like distant thunder. "So," the entity whispered, voice echoing like a gale. "You want to know about magic under your nose, sailor? Then fight me. Prove you can handle the wild freedom I offer." Popeye, though uncertain, felt his forearms flex and a grin tug at his lips. "Ha, a good fight, is it?" he said, pulling off his coat and tossing it aside. "I ain't had a real scrap in ages. Let's see if me imagination can whip up something fancy." He remembered the instructions from the pamphlet. If you can visualize the power you want, name it, believe it, and give it a voice, you can manifest it. Steeling himself, Popeye yelled, "Spinach smash." He pictured an enormous, swirling mass of leafy energy coalescing around his right fist. Indeed, swirling green power erupted around his arm, crackling with imaginative force. The female whirlwind cackled. "So you do know how to dream, Old Salt." She spun forward, wind slicing the air around her body. She became a small cyclone, hurling blasts of cutting gale that forced Popeye to leap back or deflect with his arms. Sharp breezes slashed across his forearms, leaving stinging welts, but Popeye's adrenaline soared. Raising his swirling green fist high, Popeye roared again. "Spinach! Smash!" He brought the blow hammering down, releasing a shockwave of bright emerald energy that slammed into the female whirlwind. She cried out as the daydreamscape air crackled and parted beneath the blow, dust erupting from the rocky plateau. A rumbling quake rolled across the horizon. The figure staggered. Popeye panted. "Had enough?" But the entity only smirked. Her form split into 1,000 ribbons of wind that rushed Popeye from all sides. Before he could brace himself, she reassembled behind him and wrapped intangible arms around his chest. For a terrifying moment, it felt like drowning in swirling air. Then, just as quickly, the figure released him and backed away. Though he coughed, Popeye realized she was smiling kindly. "You'll do," she said, voice surprisingly warm. "You accept the danger. You accept the invitation. My secret is this: in your world, a force is calling you to break free. Embrace it. Let the risk push you forward." And with that, her airy form dissolved into motes that drifted skyward. No sooner had she vanished than the second card's manifestation appeared, a radiant figure whose presence immediately calmed Popeye's labored breath. Her hand gentles the ward took shape as a tall woman in soft armor, face hidden behind a serene veil. She stepped forward, palm extended. A wave of peace washed over Popeye. "You stand on the precipice," she said in a low, comforting tone, "caught between the old world you know and the magic you desire. In your turmoil, I offer clarity. Battle me if you must, for that is the law of these daydreams. But this time, let's see if you can fight with calm." Popeye nodded. His heart pounded still, but a curious sense of calm filled him. "All right then," he managed. "I guess I gots to show you me spirit as well." She raised a slender hand, calling forth illusions of sword-wielding knights, each figure sprouting from the daydreamscape and rushing Popeye. The swirl of conflict roared, but Popeye closed his eyes for a moment, remembering the sense of calm that blanketed him. With deep concentration, he whispered, "I have the hurricane." He visualized a swirling bubble of protective wind. Slowly, it manifested around him, deflecting the illusion's blades. They shattered into shimmering fragments. The motherly warrior nodded in approval. "You see now. Magic isn't always flashy aggression. It can be the gentle hush before the storm breaks. I offer you the calm to perceive the wonders around you." Though she too insisted on testing him, her combat was more like a dance, each movement smooth and purposeful. Popeye answered with measured strikes, peppering them with imaginative flourishes, until finally the warrior laid a hand on Popeye's head and said, "I see your heart. May you always remember to temper your storms with gentleness." Popeye felt a pang of gratitude, and before he could say more, she faded. The final figure emerged from the haze of swirling color, an old woman dressed in furs, eyes brimming with wisdom. She was the personification of grandmother and sure safe crossing. She brandished a crooked staff that pulsed with protective energy. "There is danger in the path you seek," she said, lips curved in a stern smile. "You must learn to protect yourself from your own self-doubt and recklessness. I, too, require a test. But understand, I come to guide, not to destroy." Her magic summoned illusions of raging sea serpents and monstrous shadows, personifications of Popeye's own worst fears, loneliness, mediocrity, the dread of never truly living. One by one, they slithered from the corners of the daydreamscape, eyes gleaming with malevolence. Popeye's breath hitched. He wasn't sure how to fight them, these were his own insecurities given shape. Yet, recalling all he had learned from the previous two beings, the acceptance of risk, the calm in adversity, he mustered his courage. "Ol' Salt," he murmured, "you can do this." With unwavering faith, Popeye roared out a new technique, Tidal Heart Tsunami. He imagined water swirling at his feet, building into a massive wave of surging energy. The watery force crashed into the serpents, submerging them in a frothing deluge. Each monstrous figure evaporated under the onslaught of Popeye's manifested willpower. The grandmotherly figure nodded in approval, tapping her staff gently on the rocky ground. "You have proven your readiness, child. The force that beckons you is not malevolent. Surrender to it, it will protect you from your own despair." With that final benediction, she vanished in a swirl of shimmering light. The daydreamscape collapsed around Popeye, dissolving like morning mist. He found himself back in his loft, hands clutching the oracle cards. His breath rushed in and out, heart beating a wild tempo. Sweat soaked his shirt. And yet, for the first time in years, Popeye felt truly, deliriously alive. Over the following days, Popeye practiced the mystic spread in every spare moment, forging new imaginative techniques and exploring more ephemeral corners of the daydreamscape. He discovered the joys of shape-shifting illusions, conjuring friendly spirits, and even summoning swirling water creatures from memory. Each foray into that realm teased out secrets from the card deck, and with each victory over a personification, Popeye's soul blossomed with a sense of magic he thought lost to the world. When his ship finally moored in a nearby port town, a dreary coastal settlement overshadowed by gray skies, Popeye disembarked with a stride of renewed vigor. His crewmates, initially baffled by his newfound spark, watched with half-amused smiles as he bounded down the gangplank, eager to share his tale with the locals. The town was typical of the coast, stone buildings bleached by salt air, narrow streets slick with brine. Most people slogged through their daily errands without a second thought. Popeye, though, felt unstoppable. He approached shopkeepers, fishermen, and bystanders, thrusting the battered oracle deck toward them and regaling them with dramatic accounts of swirling illusions and epic daydream battles. More often than not, townspeople gave him odd, pitying looks. But a couple of individuals listened more intently. One of them was Hagatha. Her voice croaked, "Magic, ye say?" She was an ancient sea hag draped in ragged seaweed robes, her features contorted into a shape that drew stares of unease. A moldy grimoire dangled from her side. Despite the wrinkles that etched her face, her eyes glimmered with an unsettling excitement as Popeye recounted his experiences. She stepped closer, an odd smile twisting her lips. Such talk is a rarity these days. Nobody sees beyond the mundane, except me. She leaned forward, batting at Popeye's shoulder. And you, apparently. Popeye shuffled backward, a little startled by her intense presence. But he could see the genuine spark of fascination in her eyes. Yeah, he said, I guess I never saw magic till these here cards found me. But, well, maybe they can help you, too. Hagatha's grin grew wide, revealing surprisingly sharp teeth. Help me, yes. Indeed, if you and I were joined, we'd share that deck, wouldn't we? We could explore the daydreamscape together. Why not be my groom, handsome sailor? She reached out, bony fingers brushing against his arm. Popeye froze, blinking in shock. Now, hold on. I appreciate your interest, but I'm not exactly looking fair marriage right now. His mind reeled, searching for a gentle refusal. Hagatha laughed, though her eyes narrowed. Her tone dripped with mania, underlined by a pang of desperation. No matter. You'll see. I shall make you mine. Also drawn in by Popeye's enthusiastic preaching was another figure, Olive Oil. She arrived just in time to see Hagatha's unnerving flirtation. Olive Oil was tall and slender, with dark hair pinned up in a stylish twist. She wore bright, exuberant clothing, a red blouse embroidered with florals, a swinging yellow skirt that matched her sunny disposition. There was something endlessly vibrant about her face, constantly lit with curiosity and unfiltered excitement for life. Unlike others, her wide eyes were full of amusement rather than disbelief. Oracle cards, huh? Olive Oil said with an airy laugh. Big whoop. If you have imagination, you don't need fancy pieces of cardboard to make magic. I can daydream just by deciding to do so. She spun in a graceful circle, as though conjuring invisible dancers from her own private fantasy. To Popeye's eyes, it was as though luminous shapes flickered around her. Popeye was intrigued. There was a carefree optimism about Olive that matched, in a different way, the spark he himself had felt discovering the Oracle deck. He realized he found her quite beautiful. Yet her dismissive stance on the card stung him. He slid the deck into his jacket pocket and crossed his arms. Maybe so, he muttered, but these cards brought me a happiness I ain't known in decades. I'm mighty fond of 'em. Olive shook her head, though she smiled in good humor. Suit yourself. But trust me, you don't need a deck to have magic. Magic is in your mind, and you can create entire worlds if you just let yourself dream. Hagatha, who'd been eyeing Olive with undisguised contempt, sneered, Oh, be quiet, you little hummingbird. The man has found real magic, not your silly daydream illusions. She prodded Olive's shoulder in annoyance. The clash of these two energies crackled tangibly in the air. Popeye noticed Olive's eyes flash in anger just as Hagatha shoved her. Shocked, Popeye lunged forward and caught Olive before she stumbled. His arms circled around her waist, pulling her upright. For a heartbeat, they both froze, aware of each other's warmth. Olive's eyes were wide, and for a moment, she placed a delicate hand over Popeye's. Hagatha's face contorted with jealous rage. Wretched woman, she spat. He's mine. Then she spun on her heel and stormed off, seaweed robes swirling about her. Olive breathed out slowly, turning in Popeye's arms. A faint blush dusted her cheeks, but she wore a coy grin. Thanks for the catch, sailor man. Popeye cleared his throat, adjusting his cap. Glad to help, he said softly, feeling an unexpected tug of affection for her. It was a fleeting moment, but it felt more real than anything he had experienced in ages. He realized that beyond her teasing manner, Olive radiated a genuine warmth. Grinning, she took his hand. Let's go somewhere quiet. I want to show you something. Her voice was playful and full of promise. Curiosity burning within, Popeye followed her through winding alleys until they reached an abandoned courtyard with overgrown ivy creeping along the walls. There, Olive turned to face him. I can sense you're happy now, but also, you're clinging to those cards for dear life, she said, tone gentler than before. I saw how battered and worn they are. I don't want you to place all your faith in something that might fall apart. Popeye scuffed a boot against the cobblestones. Sure, the cards are a bit worse for wear, he murmured, but they've shown me magic. Before them, I was near hopeless. Olive nodded. I get it. But trust me, you have that magic inside you already. You just don't realize it yet. She closed her eyes, extending both hands out to her sides. Share a daydream with me. If we both tell each other what we see, we can imagine the same environment, and it'll feel real. Hesitant but intrigued, Popeye stepped closer. How do we start? Just close your eyes, Olive said softly. Picture something wondrous. Then tell me about it. Taking a deep breath, Popeye tried to will an image into his mind. At first, all he saw was blankness. He felt that creeping anxiety, maybe he really did need the cards. But then he recalled that first daydream battle, the swirling winds, the rocky plateau. Slowly, he conjured a new scene, a sunlit cove with crystalline water, ringed by lush palm trees. He imagined the tang of salt air and the glow of warm sand underfoot. I see. A hidden lagoon, he began. The water is bright as a gemstone, so clear you can see fish swimming. We're on a little stretch of white sand, and palm fronds overhead sway in the breeze. Olive smiled, eyes still closed. I see them too, she whispered. She laughed softly, stepping forward until Popeye felt her presence near him. And in the water, there are shimmering jellyfish, but they're harmless. They glow pink, lighting up the cove. A surge of excitement fluttered through Popeye's chest. He realized he could see exactly what she described in his mind's eye, glittering pink orbs drifting gracefully under the water's surface. The daydream was forming around them, as real as the illusions he summoned in the daydreamscape, but created purely from their shared imaginations. It was peaceful, mystical. Yet at that very moment, Hagatha was in a cramped cellar across town. She stirred a noxious brew inside a chipped cauldron. The rank odor of fish bones and rotting sea plants wafted around her. Clutching her grimoire, she muttered incantations under her breath, fueled by bitterness and longing. She flung in a handful of crushed shells and hissed, "All love is false if not bound by magic." Lightning crackled in the candlelit gloom. Her bony fingers traced arcane symbols in the air. Summoning the old powers, she invoked the gods of the sea to bless her twisted love potion. "Hear me, old ones," Hagatha cried out. "I need the heart of a sailor who has found magic. Lend me the power to make him mine." The steam parted with a crackle. A towering presence shimmered into being behind Hagatha, a broad-shouldered man with a trident that crackled with lightning, swirling seafoam coiling around his godlike form. Poseidon, storm god of the seas, loomed in the murky confines of Hagatha's hideout. Startled, Hagatha nearly dropped her ladle. Who are you?" she rasped. "I am Poseidon," came the thunderous reply. "I sensed your incantation. You call upon the ancient realms for a man of the sea. Why?" Hagatha steadied herself, eyes gleaming. "I want Popeye's heart, for he possesses a wondrous oracle deck, a relic that grants him the power of the daydreamscape." Poseidon froze. A deep frown marred his chiseled features. "He has an oracle deck?" he repeated slowly, voice echoing with raw emotion. "Do you know its appearance?" Hagatha described the battered box and the arcane symbols Popeye had brandished. Poseidon's glare turned thunderous, seafoam swirling with renewed intensity around his powerful arms. "That deck belonged to me, once," Poseidon snarled. "It was lost long ago. I have scoured every corner of the daydreamscape to reclaim it. So a mortal now wields my cards?" His eyes burned with fury, but beneath that, longing. "No mortal has the right to keep them." In a heartbeat, Poseidon vanished from Hagatha's cellar, disappearing in a swirl of water. She stood, trembling in the aftermath, uncertain whether this turn of events would help her claim Popeye or not. But her heart pounded, the love potion bubbled away in her cauldron, half finished. Meanwhile, Popeye and Olive remained blissfully unaware of the gathering storm. In the daydream lagoon they shared, time felt fluid. Popeye marveled at how seamlessly Olive's imagination blended with his. The illusions they created were vibrant, shifting from shimmering beaches to tropical jungles filled with playful monkeys. Every detail sprang to life, not as vivid as the oracle-induced daydreamscape Popeye knew, but every bit as meaningful because they were forging it together. Eventually, Popeye fidgeted and, by force of habit, dug into his coat to retrieve the oracle cards. "Olive," he said gently, "would you mind if I do a quick reading, just to see what the cards say about us?" Olive's expression dimmed a little. "I get that you value them, but do you really need them to enjoy this?" She swept an arm around, gesturing at the daydream environment they'd built together. "This is ours, we didn't need the deck to create it." Popeye winced, feeling a pang of defensiveness. "It's not that I'm ungrateful. I like the randomness. The cards remind me that magic can surprise you, that you can't plan everything." Before Olive could respond, a ripple shook the daydream. Waves of shimmering distortion parted the lush trees and glittering water. A cluster of armored figures in scaled turquoise plating appeared, Atlantean bounty hunters. They carried spear-like weapons that glowed with phosphorescent runes and hissed in a language that seemed to bubble. One stepped forward, oceanic eyes narrowed on Popeye's deck. By order of Poseidon, the bounty hunter growled, the oracle deck will be returned to its rightful owner. Hand it over, mortal. Olive bristled, stepping protectively beside Popeye. Who do you think you are? She demanded, raising her arms. Odd flickers of her own daydream illusions spun around her. Hints of bright confetti, swirling sparks, and phosphorescent butterflies danced at her elbows. Popeye clenched his fists, anger flaring. He had just begun to discover a sense of purpose, and now these intruders wanted to take it all away. You got another thing coming if you think I'll give these cards up without a fight. He remembered the Daydreamscape's rules. He could wield any power he believed in. The bounty hunters hissed in unison, watery magic swirling around their weapons. Surrender or be subdued. Popeye looked at Olive, who nodded. We stand together, she said, a grin lighting her face. Let's show them what two dreamers can do. The Atlanteans charged. Popeye roared at the top of his lungs, Spinach smash. Summoning swirling green energy around his fists, he barreled into the lead warrior, sending him sprawling with a thunderous blow. Olive, more graceful, danced between them, conjuring illusions that flickered into half-real entities. She cried out, Dazzle Shell. And a shimmering, prismatic conch shell appeared over one bounty hunter's head, bursting into rainbow fragments that blinded him temporarily. But they were outnumbered. 2, 3, 5, 7 Atlantean warriors lunged in with scything spear thrusts, magical nets that crackled with watery arcs, and swirling columns of brine that battered Popeye's defenses. Olive conjured illusions of monstrous birds to peck at the Atlanteans, but her illusions fizzled when struck with enough force. Popeye found himself pinned momentarily by a net that sizzled with sea magic. The cords tightened around his biceps, spitting sparks. Gritting his teeth, he channeled a new move, born of his desire to protect Olive, Harbor's heart. A burst of golden light erupted from his chest, snapping the net's tendrils. He powered free, lashing out at the Atlantean. Nevertheless, the tide was turning. More bounty hunters materialized, illusions stacking upon illusions as the Daydreamscape quaked. Olive cried out, stumbling backward from a vicious spear slash. Popeye lunged to defend her, but realized they were hopelessly surrounded. Suddenly, a cackling shriek echoed overhead. Hagatha swooped in astride a crooked broom bristling with barnacles, the end of which hissed with greenish flame. Her moldy grimoire slung around her neck, flapping in the wind. She glowered at the Atlanteans. You dare attack my Popeye? She spat a wad of spell-laden green fire at the warriors, sizzling brine and conjuring noxious fumes. The Atlanteans reeled, battered by the sea hag's unholy magic. Hagatha leapt from her broom, slamming her staff into the ground. She shrieked, Tidebreaker Hex. A torrent of blackish water erupted, swirling with hexing runes that battered the Atlanteans. Popeye, for a moment, was stunned. She was terrifying, but she was helping them. Olive, though wary, took advantage of the chaos and conjured illusions of giant anchor chains bursting from the sand. Anchor's embrace, she cried, sending the golden chains rattling around several bounty hunters, pinning them in place. Popeye, seizing the opportunity, unleashed his renewed Spinach smash. To break apart their defensive formation. Hagatha brandished a handful of sulphurous powder from her robe and flung it into the nearest warrior's face, cackling gleefully. With each blow, the Atlanteans staggered or retreated. Finally, battered by these combined assaults, the bounty hunters were forced to step back. One of them hissed with seething frustration, We will not fail Poseidon again. A swirling portal of oceanic energy formed behind them. They glared at Popeye with disgust. We will return. With greater force. Then they retreated through the shimmering portal, disappearing in a rush of water. The courtyard stilled, illusions settling. Popeye stood, chest heaving, as the daydream environment partially dissolved, revealing the dilapidated real-world courtyard around them. Hagatha wiped her brow, panting, eyes fixed on Popeye. You see, my beloved? We make a potent team. I helped you. Popeye, reeling from the adrenaline, nodded slowly. You did. Thank you for that. He paused. But I ain't your beloved. Hagatha's face twisted, a flicker of heartbreak and fury crossing her features. You offered up that deck as if it was your anchor to this world, yet you'd let me help you fight but not accept me? She swallowed, her old voice trembling with raw emotion. Fine. See if I care. She aimed a last, parting glare at Olive, who returned it with a steely gaze. Popeye exhaled, looking at the battered oracle deck clenched in his hand. One corner was now bent from the battle. He felt an ache, both physically and in his heart. The fight had hammered home that these cards marked him as a target. So many sought them, Hagatha for love, Poseidon out of rage, the Atlanteans as bounty hunters, and who knew who else might come after them. Yet he recalled Olive's words. He recalled how he'd conjured powers with his own imagination, independent of the deck's guidance. Could he truly stand on his own? He glanced at Olive, whose face was a mix of concern and relief. A wave of fondness swept him. She laid a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You all right?" Popeye nodded. "Aye. But I'm guessing they'll be back soon. They want these cards." He clenched them protectively against his chest. Then, swallowing, he forced himself to consider a radical choice. Maybe I should just give 'em up. Keeping 'em only puts me and everyone I care about in danger. Hagatha's voice quivered with confusion. "You'd give them up? But that's the source of your magic. The reason She couldn't finish. Popeye's expression turned thoughtful. "At first, it was the source. But I see now, me real magic might be right here." He tapped his temple, then gestured to Olive and, in a small way, to Hagatha too. Sharing illusions and standing together with others, that's its own power. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Popeye slowly raised the oracle deck, still battered and wet from the earlier scuffle. He took one last lingering look at the runic designs, the swirling lines. He thought of all the daydream battles, the personifications that guided him, the newfound sense of wonder. Yet he realized the daydreamscape was open to him even without the deck, if he believed in it. Finally, he let out a slow breath and dropped the deck on the ground. "I surrender them," he said loudly, voice echoing through the courtyard. "I know Poseidon'll come fare them. So I'm leaving them. Let him take 'em back to wherever they came from." The words shook Hagatha to her core. She stared in disbelief, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. "You fool," she hissed. "You had the power to change everything, to have a life beyond the mundane. Why would you throw that away?" Olive slipped an arm through Popeye's. "Because you can't throw away what's inside you," she said softly, looking up at him with a proud, radiant smile. "Those cards awaken something in him. But they're not the source of that something. He is." Hagatha's hand reached out, trembling, then fell to her side. She seemed on the verge of speaking, but instead snapped her mouth shut. Fury and heartbreak warred in her aged features. Without another word, she turned, mounted her broom, and soared into the sky. A cloud of briny smoke trailed behind her, a testament to her pain. Popeye watched her silhouette dwindle into the distance. He felt a pang of sympathy. He genuinely liked that she appreciated magic, but he could never return her obsessive devotion. Perhaps, in time, she would see that. Shaking his head, he turned to Olive, who gently squeezed his hand. "You did it," she said. "You let the cards go." Popeye laughed softly, tears stinging his own eyes. I guess I did. Feels like I cut me anchor line. It's scary but strangely freeing." Olive leaned up, pressing a tender kiss to his cheek. "I'm proud of you, sailor man." His heart soared. The daydream realm flickered around them, the illusions of the battered courtyard fading back into the real world. Yet, in that moment, the mundane setting took on a soft glow. Popeye realized that everyday reality itself could be special, if one saw it through the right lens. He wrapped Olive in a warm embrace, inhaling the subtle floral scent of her hair. She turned her face up, and he lowered his lips to hers, meeting in a gentle, lingering kiss that seemed to roll back the dull monotony of the world around them. The city noises receded, leaving just the rush of the tide in the distance and the beating of their hearts. When they parted, Popeye glanced once more at the abandoned oracle deck lying in the courtyard. A breeze rustled through, and the cards shimmered faintly, perhaps Poseidon's presence reaching for them from afar. Popeye swallowed, a swirl of gratitude and nostalgia dancing inside him. "Thank ye," he murmured softly to the deck. Then he turned away, slipping an arm around Olive's waist. They left the courtyard, stepping into a new chapter of their lives, one shaped not by fate drawn from a deck, but by the power to dream and the will to fight for those dreams. Even without the cards, Popeye felt magic thrumming beneath his rough skin. And though the storm might come again, this time, he was ready to face it. Word spread of the Atlantean bounty hunters' retreat and Hagatha's furious flight. Some locals whispered about the battered deck that had vanished, presumably reclaimed by Poseidon in the hush of dawn. Others gossiped about Popeye, the scrappy old salt who had somehow lost everything but, in that process, might have gained something far more precious. Days rolled by, and though they didn't see Hagatha again, A few rumors claimed she was spotted gathering cursed coral from the ocean floor, her heartbreak fueling darker incantations. Poseidon, as far as anyone knew, seized the deck and returned to his storm-racked domain in the daydreamscape. His rage might still simmer, but for now, he had what he wanted, his lost oracle deck. Whether or not it restored the wonder he craved remained a mystery. As for Popeye and Olive, they carried on sailing with the merchant crew for a little while, though the slow, mundane routines no longer weighed on Popeye the way they once had. Each day, he and Olive would carve out time to slip into their shared daydreams, weaving illusions and new wonders that spilled over into how they saw reality. On deck, Popeye would stand by the prow, scanning the horizon with a fresh sense of anticipation. The color of the sea seemed bluer, the wind tasted sweeter. When storms arose, he greeted them with a fierce grin. "Life's got storms," he would say, "but storms mean lightning, and lightning means excitement." Back in port towns, he made a small practice of helping others see beyond their daily drudgery, without needing an oracle deck. Sometimes, he would gather children and teach them playful illusions, or spin tales of the daydream battles he once fought, encouraging them to conjure their own heroic feats in their minds. It was a gentle spark that he offered to those who needed it, a chance to see magic right beneath their nose. And in that way, Popeye's full transformation took root. His arc began in despair, craving magic from some external source. Now, a subtle contentment and confidence filled him. He no longer needed the battered cards to believe. He understood that wonder was something you carried within, fueled by the willingness to fight your own cynicism and dull routine. Olive, in turn, discovered she wasn't alone in her imaginative forays. She'd always gamely superimposed fantasies onto the real world, but she'd never before found someone who truly met her halfway. She watched Popeye embrace that same free-flowing creativity, and it warmed her heart. Once dismissive of organized magic, she found a new appreciation for what the oracle cards represented, an invitation for the cynic to believe. She grew more open to others who needed tangible symbols to unlock their daydream potential. And so her own worldview softened, melding playful spontaneity with understanding. Far across the waves, Hagatha's heart still ached. She brooded in brackish tide pools, questioning how to fill the emptiness in her soul. But sometimes, she recalled Popeye's words about finding magic in oneself. Whether or not she ever heeded them would be her journey to walk. For now, her heartbreak might prove a stepping stone to rediscovering a different kind of love, one that started with self-acceptance. A part of her realized, however, that she might be years away from letting go of her bitterness. Perhaps, in time, she'd find the strength to step out of the shadows of obsession and conjure a dream for herself. And Poseidon. In his hidden realm of swirling ocean storms, he held the newly reclaimed oracle deck. He tested card after card, stepping into daydream battles with the same personifications that had once guided Popeye. But something felt different. The deck had known another master, one who'd awaken it again. Poseidon sensed echoes of Popeye's fighting spirit in the daydreamscape, the lingering sense that magic was not just about power, it was about wonder, and about sharing it with others. Perhaps, one day, the storm god's bitterness would yield to that realization. For the moment, though, thunderclouds raged over his domain. As for Popeye and Olive Oil, they walked arm in arm down a twilight-lit pier, gazing at the moon's reflection dancing across the dark waters. The hush of night was broken only by the calls of distant seabirds. Olive leaned her head on Popeye's shoulder. "You ever regret giving the cards up?" she asked softly. Popeye ran a hand over his weathered face, thinking. "I miss him, in a way," he admitted. "But not as much as I thought I would. 'Cause the real magic's still here." He pressed a hand to his chest. "And I've got you." Olive smiled. "And I've got you," she echoed. A warm breeze ruffled their hair, carrying the faint melody of the sea. The moment felt timeless, a quiet close to a tumultuous chapter. In the distance, lightning flickered across a remote patch of clouds, but the thunder never reached them. Popeye let out a small chuckle at the sight, recalling how it all began with a single, fateful bolt of lightning striking his beloved spinach can. Strange how a chance encounter with the storm had led him to the battered oracle deck, and how that deck in turn led him back to himself. He took Olive's hand. Together, they stepped forward along the pier, hearts brimming with the promise of new horizons. The world was still, in many ways, dull and mundane. But they didn't see it that way anymore. They saw potential, places to weave illusions, battles to fight in the daydreamscape, wonders to unearth. Magic is everywhere, Popeye mused. If you just look for it. Neither knew exactly where the path would lead. New villains might arise, new daydream battles might call them forth. Hagatha's potions and Poseidon's fury might spark future storms. But for now, In the hush of the ocean breeze, life felt grand. They had each other. They had their imaginations. And that was enough to keep the spark of magic burning brightly against the grey humdrum of routine. Some say that on certain nights, when the moon is full, if you wander the docks alone, you might hear Popeye's hearty laughter echoing in the sea spray. Or you might catch a glimpse of olive oil dancing at the water's edge, conjuring ephemeral shapes that vanish in a shimmer of starlight. And if you listen very carefully, you might sense an old sea hag's sorrowful chant floating on the brine, or see a trident's glow deep beneath the waves. Yet whether you believe those visions or dismiss them as superstition, one thing is certain: the magic is there. It always has been. And somewhere, in the daydreamscape that intertwines with our own, a sailor man still roars the names of his impossible attacks, forging the world anew with every breath of imagination he can muster. The end, of course, is only the beginning. For daydreamers never truly stop dreaming. And so Popeye and Olive Oil sail on, unbound, unafraid, and absolutely alive with the magic they once thought impossible.